He didn't know her name. 3 years. Same house. Same floors she scrubbed. Same blood she cleaned without asking questions. To Alessandro Bellini, the man who made millionaires beg and politicians disappear, she was furniture. Forgettable. Invisible. Then she wore the dress. Floral red. Homemade. Meant for a 15-minute phone call with her sister. He saw her in the hallway and his entire world fractured. The most dangerous man in the city, the wolf who'd never lost control, never wanted what he couldn't take, suddenly couldn't breathe. One look. 7 seconds. Everything changed. But here's the problem with being seen by a monster. His enemies noticed too. Now her mother's address is leaked. Her sister's school is compromised. And the maid who just wanted to feel beautiful for 15 minutes? She's about to learn that some men don't just fall in love. They drag you into hell with them. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The Bellini estate didn't sleep. Even at 2 a.m., when the city outside folded into silence, the mansion hummed with a quiet menace. Security cameras blinked red in every corner. Men in dark suits prowled the gardens. And somewhere in the East Wing, Alessandro Bellini sat alone in his office, a glass of bourbon untouched on his desk, reviewing ledgers that detailed empires built on fear. He didn't blink at the numbers. Didn't flinch at what they represented. This was his language. Power, control, consequence. Emotion was a liability. Softness was death. At 36, Alessandro had inherited an empire and doubled it. His tailored suits were Italian, custom-made. His handshake could greenlight a fortune or end a bloodline. People called him the wolf behind closed doors, though never to his face. But tonight, the numbers blurred together. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the stubble there, exhaustion creeping in. The bourbon remained untouched. Everything remained untouched, including him. He was surrounded by people and utterly alone. The estate held 40 rooms, 24 staff, endless security. And yet when he walked these halls, he felt like the only living thing in a mausoleum of wealth. His phone buzzed. Another situation requiring his attention. Another problem only violence could solve. He ignored it. 3 floors below, in the servants' quarters tucked behind the kitchen, Catherine Williams sat on the edge of a narrow bed, rolling her aching shoulders. 24 years old, and her body already kept score of every floor she'd scrubbed, every window she'd polished, every invisible hour she'd worked. She'd been at the Bellini estate for 3 years, the longest job she'd ever kept, and the loneliest. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, arriving before dawn, leaving after dark, unseen and unheard. Mr. Bellini had looked at her exactly twice. Once, when the agency sent her for the interview, his green eyes had scanned her briefly, clinically, the way you'd assess furniture. Functional? Good. Approved. The second time was 8 months ago when she'd accidentally been cleaning the hallway when he walked through. He'd brushed past her without pausing, his cologne, something expensive and cold, lingering in the air after he disappeared around the corner. That was the reality. She existed in the margins of his world, necessary but forgettable. The help. The background. The erasable. Catherine pulled off her uniform, a shapeless gray dress that smelled like lemon cleaner and exhaustion, and reached for the garment hanging on the back of her door. A floral red dress. Her grandmother had made it. Sent it 4 months ago with a note. Baby girl, even Cinderella got one night. Wear something that reminds you you're alive. Catherine had never worn it. Where would she? Her life was work, sleep, and the occasional phone call home to Detroit where her mother's medical bills kept mounting. There were no parties, no dates, no moments that required red. But tomorrow was her younger sister's birthday, and Catherine had promised to video call during the small celebration their mother was throwing. She wanted Jasmine to see her in something beautiful. Something that wasn't defeat and detergent. She'd wear it tomorrow evening, during her break. Just for an hour. Just to remember she was 24 and alive and more than the dirt she cleaned. Catherine ran her fingers over the fabric. Soft cotton printed with red poppies and cream-colored blooms. It had a fitted waist, a sweetheart neckline, and fell just below her knees. It was the most beautiful thing she owned. She hung it carefully and lay down on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd be visible. At least to the people who loved her. That would be enough. Upstairs, Alessandro finally closed his ledger. The numbers vanished into darkness. He stood, stretching his tall frame, and walked to the window overlooking the gardens. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a world he controlled but never truly touched. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered when he'd stopped feeling anything. When power had replaced presence. When control had consumed connection. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Cold. Untouchable. 36 years old and already a ghost in his own life. He didn't know that 3 floors below, a woman he'd never truly seen was holding a red dress against her chest, daring to imagine being visible. He didn't know that in less than 18 hours, that dress would detonate something in him he thought had died years ago. He didn't know he was about to lose control. It happened at 7:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Alessandro was descending the main staircase, adjusting his cufflinks, preparing for another tedious evening of political theater. A fundraiser. A room full of people who feared him pretending to admire him. He'd shake hands, make veiled threats disguised as jokes, and leave early. The same script. The same emptiness. He was halfway down the marble stairs when he saw her. The woman in the red dress stood in the hallway intersection near the East Gallery, her back to him, holding a phone to her ear. The dress hugged her waist, flared gently at her hips, and the floral pattern seemed to bloom across the fabric. Poppies and cream blossoms that shouldn't have mattered but somehow did. Her hair, dark, natural curls he'd never noticed before, was pulled back with a simple clip, exposing the graceful curve of her neck. Alessandro stopped walking. His hand gripped the banister. She laughed at something someone said on the phone. A real laugh, genuine and warm, the kind of sound that didn't exist in his world, and shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The movement made the dress sway. Something in his chest cracked open. Who was she? He knew everyone in this house. Every guard. Every driver. Every. And then she turned slightly, still talking, and he caught her profile. The maid. His maid. The one who cleaned. Existed. Somewhere. He'd never. He couldn't remember her name. Couldn't remember ever actually seeing her, though logically she must have been here, must have been in his peripheral vision 1,000 times. How had he never seen her? Catherine laughed again, softer this time, and said into the phone, I promise, Jazz. I'm wearing it right now. Grandma would be proud. A pause. No, nobody's here. It's just me in the hallway. I only have 15 minutes before I need to change back. 15 minutes. She was wearing that dress for a phone call. For someone who wasn't even there. Alessandro descended another step, and the stair creaked. Catherine spun around. Their eyes met. Her smile vanished. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. I have to go, she whispered into the receiver, not breaking eye contact. I'll call you back. She lowered the phone slowly, her other hand moving instinctively to smooth the dress, as if she'd been caught stealing. Mr. Bellini, she said, her voice barely steady. I'm so sorry. I was just, my break. I didn't think anyone would be. What's your name? The question hung in the air between them. She blinked. Sir. Your name. His voice came out rougher than intended. He cleared his throat, descended the final stairs until he was standing 10 feet from her. What is it? She stared at him like he'd asked her to solve a calculus equation. Catherine. Sir. Catherine Williams. I've worked here for 3 years. Her eyebrows lifted. You knew that? He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was he hadn't known. Hadn't cared to know. And now, standing in this hallway with her in that dress, the reality of his blindness hit him like a bullet he hadn't seen coming. 3 years. 3 years she'd moved through his home, touched his things, existed in his space, and he'd looked through her like she was air. The dress, he said, his voice low. It's beautiful. Devastating. Undoing me. It's my grandmother's design, Catherine said quickly, misreading his pause as criticism. I know it's not appropriate for staff. I was just, my sister's birthday. I wanted her to see me in something nice. I wasn't attending the event. I swear I'll change right now. Don't. The word came out like a command. Like a plea. She froze. Alessandro took a step closer. Then another. The expensive marble floor between them disappeared. He could smell her now. Not the lemon cleaner he unconsciously associated with the staff, but something softer. Cocoa butter. Something warm and real. Don't change, he said again, quieter this time. Catherine's breath hitched. Sir, I don't understand. Neither do I. And it was true. He didn't understand why his heart was pounding. Why every instinct in his body, instincts honed for danger and opportunity, was screaming that something fundamental had just shifted. Why this woman, this dress, this moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff he hadn't known existed. He'd built an empire on control. And in 7 seconds, she'd taken it all away. What do you think happens when a man who's never truly seen anyone suddenly can't look away? Drop your thoughts below. Catherine took a step back. Then another. The marble felt cold through the thin soles of her shoes, the only pair of heels she owned, borrowed from her roommate. Everything about this moment felt wrong. The way he was looking at her. The way the air had thickened between them. The way her pulse hammered against her throat. I should go, she whispered. Wait. Alessandro's hand lifted slightly, not reaching for her but suspended in the space between them, a gesture that looked like it cost him something. His jaw tightened. Those green eyes that had looked through her for 3 years now pinned her in place with an intensity that made her skin burn. I need to. Catherine gestured vaguely toward the servants' quarters. My shift isn't over. I have the 3rd floor bathrooms to clean before. Take the night off. What? Take the night off. Each word came out deliberate, controlled, like he was negotiating a treaty instead of speaking to his maid. You're not working tonight. Catherine's hands curled into fists at her sides. Something hot and dangerous flickered in her chest. Not gratitude, but anger. With all due respect, sir, I can't afford to take nights off. I have bills. You'll be paid. That's not the point. His eyebrow arched. Then what is? That you don't get to notice me now, she wanted to scream. That you don't get to see me for the first time because of a dress and suddenly think you can reorganize my life with a command. That I've been invisible to you for 3 years and you don't get to make me feel guilty for wanting to stay that way. But she didn't say any of that. Because he was Alessandro Bellini, and she was the help, and there were rules to this world even if he just shattered them. I should change, she said instead, her voice flat. Catherine. Hearing her name in his mouth felt like a violation. Like he'd reached inside her chest and touched something he had no right to touch. She turned away. Please. The word stopped her. Not because it was a command, but because it wasn't. Because Alessandro Bellini, the man who controlled half the city's underground, who made grown men weep with a phone call, had just said please like he was the one without power. Catherine looked back over her shoulder. He stood there, perfectly still in his expensive suit, and for just a second, she saw something in his face that looked almost like panic. Like he was watching something slip away that he'd just discovered he couldn't afford to lose. I don't understand what's happening, she said quietly. Neither do I. The honesty in those 3 words cracked something in her carefully constructed walls. She turned fully to face him again, hugging herself, suddenly aware of how exposed the dress made her feel. How seen. Mr. Bellini. Alessandro. I can't call you that. Why not? Because. She laughed, a sharp broken sound. Because 3 hours ago you walked past me in the kitchen and didn't even blink. Because last week I cleaned blood out of your office carpet. Don't worry, I don't ask questions. And you handed me cash without looking at my face. Because I'm the person who scrubs your toilets and you're the man who owns everything. And this, she gestured at the space between them. Whatever this is, it doesn't exist. It can't exist. Alessandro moved closer. Not touching, but close enough that she had to tilt her head up to maintain eye contact. You're right, he said, his voice low and rough. 3 hours ago, I was blind. Last week I was a fool. Every day for 3 years, I walked through this house like a dead man and didn't see the one real thing in it. Don't do that. Catherine's voice trembled. Don't make me into something I'm not because of a dress. I'm not a fairy tale. I'm not your salvation or your redemption arc. I'm just trying to survive and I can't. Her voice broke. She pressed her hand to her mouth, horrified that she was about to cry in front of him. That he'd finally seen her and the first thing he'd witnessed was her falling apart. I'm sorry, Alessandro said, and the words sounded like they were being dragged out of him. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I made you invisible. I'm sorry that the first time I look at you, really look at you, it feels like this. Like what? He held her gaze, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. Like I've been starving my entire life and didn't know it until right now. The words hung between them. Too honest, too intense, too impossible. Catherine shook her head slowly. I need to go. This time, he didn't stop her. She walked away, her heels clicking against marble, the red dress swirling around her legs. She didn't run. She wouldn't give him that. But she felt his eyes on her back the entire way. And when she finally turned the corner and pressed herself against the wall, her whole body shaking, she realized with terrifying clarity that she was running from something far more dangerous than a mafia boss's sudden attention. She was running from the fact that when he'd said her name, when he'd looked at her like that, some traitorous part of her had wanted to stay. Behind her, in the empty hallway, Alessandro stood motionless. His hands were shaking. He couldn't remember the last time his hands had shaken. He'd built an empire on control, on calculated moves, on never wanting anything he couldn't take. And now he wanted something. Someone he had no right to touch. The rational part of his brain catalogued all the reasons this was insane. She worked for him. The power dynamic was impossible. His world was violence and darkness, and she deserved better than that. She deserved better than him. But the irrational part, the part that had cracked open the moment she turned around in that red dress, didn't care about reasons. It only knew that for 3 years he'd been surrounded by people and utterly alone. And for 7 minutes, he hadn't been. Alessandro pulled out his phone, dialed his head of security. Sir. The maid. Catherine Williams. I want to know everything about her. A pause. Sir, is there a security concern? Yes, he thought. She's threatening everything I thought I knew about myself. Just do it, he said and ended the call. He walked to the window, watched his reflection stare back, and for the first time in years, he looked like a man who'd just lost something. Or found it. He couldn't tell which terrified him more. Catherine didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, still wearing the red dress because taking it off felt like admitting something had happened. That the way he'd looked at her had meant something. That her name in his mouth had rewired something fundamental in her chest. At 5 a.m., she finally changed into her uniform and reported to the kitchen. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, looked up from her clipboard with unusual sharpness. Mr. Bellini wants to see you. Catherine's blood went cold. What? In his office. Now. Mrs. Chen's expression was unreadable. Should I be worried about your job security, girl? Yes, Catherine thought. But not for the reasons you think. She climbed the stairs with leaden feet, each step a negotiation with panic. Maybe he was going to fire her. Maybe last night had crossed some invisible line and now she'd lose the income that kept her mother's medication coming, that paid for her sister's school supplies. Maybe he'd decided she was a problem that needed eliminating. She'd heard stories about what happened to problems in Alessandro Bellini's world. She knocked on the office door. Come in. He sat behind his desk, looking like he hadn't slept either. His suit was immaculate as always, but there were shadows under his eyes, and his tie was loose, the first time she'd ever seen him less than perfectly composed. You wanted to see me, sir? She kept her voice neutral, her eyes on the floor. Look at me. It wasn't a request. Catherine lifted her gaze. Those green eyes locked onto hers, and the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. I need you to do something for me, Alessandro said. Of course, sir. What needs cleaning? His jaw tightened. Not cleaning. I need. He paused, and something that looked like frustration crossed his face. My sister is coming to visit. She arrives this afternoon. Catherine blinked. She'd worked here 3 years and never knew he had a sister. Isabella lives in Italy, he continued, standing and moving to the window. Anywhere but looking at her. She's 26. Difficult. Refuses security. She thinks I'm. He stopped. She thinks I've become the thing our father was. The vulnerability in those words made Catherine's chest ache. What does this have to do with me? She won't talk to me. Won't listen. Every time she visits, she stays for 3 days and we spend 72 hours destroying each other. He turned back to face her, and the exhaustion in his expression was so raw it hurt to witness. But she might talk to you. Sir, I'm a maid. You're a person. The words came out sharp. The only person in this entire house who looks at me like I'm not a monster or a meal ticket. She needs that. She needs. He stopped, ran a hand through his dark hair. I'm asking you to spend time with her. Keep her company. Help her not hate me quite so much. Catherine stared at him. You want me to befriend your sister? I'm asking you to be yourself around someone who needs it. And if I say no? Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, but something more complicated. Then you say no. I'm not ordering you. I'm. He swallowed. I'm asking. There it was again. That word. Please hidden beneath asking. Catherine should have said no. Should have run back to her invisible existence where she cleaned and disappeared and didn't get tangled in the emotional wreckage of powerful men. But she thought about last night. About the way he'd said her name. About that look on his face when he'd admitted he'd been starving. And some foolish part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the monster everyone said he was. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll try. Relief washed over his face so completely it almost looked like pain. Thank you. But I have conditions, Catherine added, surprising herself. I'm not your employee when I'm with your sister. I'm a person. We talk as equals, and you don't get to command me or control how I interact with her. And when this is over, when she leaves, we go back to normal. Normal. Me being invisible. You not seeing me. She forced the words out even though they tasted like acid. This, whatever happened last night, it was a moment. That's all. It doesn't change anything. Alessandro crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes, could feel the heat radiating off him. What if I don't want it to be just a moment? Her breath caught. You don't get to want that. Why not? Because you're you and I'm me, and the world doesn't work that way. Then maybe the world is wrong. They stood there, suspended in the impossible space between what was and what could never be. Catherine's heart hammered so loud she was certain he could hear it. The office door burst open. A young woman with dark hair and Alessandro's sharp cheekbones swept in, designer luggage forgotten in the hallway, her eyes bright with barely contained fury. Alessandro, you controlling bastard, I specifically told you I'd take a cab from the airport, but apparently you sent. She stopped mid-sentence, her gaze landing on Catherine. Then on Alessandro. Then on the minimal space between them. Her eyebrows shot up. Oh, Isabella Bellini said, a slow smile spreading across her face. Oh, this is interesting. Alessandro stepped back immediately, his expression slamming back into controlled neutrality. Bella. You're early. Clearly. Isabella's eyes danced between them. And you are. Catherine Williams, Catherine said, finding her voice. I work here. She works here, Isabella repeated, her smile turning sharp. And my brother had her in his office, standing that close, looking like... She laughed, delighted. Oh, Alessandro. You absolute hypocrite. Bella. For years you've lectured me about appropriate relationships and staying away from dangerous men, and here you are. Enough. His voice could have cut glass. Isabella turned to Catherine, ignoring him completely. Did he tell you how our father met our mother? She was a waitress. He saw her across a restaurant and lost his mind. Married her 3 months later. Her smile was all edges now. We Bellinis have a thing for falling catastrophically. The room felt too small, too hot, too full of truths Catherine wasn't ready to hear. I should go, she whispered. Don't. Isabella grabbed her wrist gently. Please. I could use someone real to talk to. Someone who isn't paid to worship my brother or afraid he'll kill them. Catherine looked at Alessandro. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched at his sides. It's your choice, he said quietly. And that's what trapped her. Not the command. The choice. Okay, Catherine said to Isabella. Let's talk. Isabella beamed and pulled her toward the door, chattering about the flight and Italian coffee and how much she hated the family business. Catherine glanced back once. Alessandro stood alone in his office, watching her leave with an expression that looked like a man watching his only lifeline walk away. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself 3 days would pass and everything would return to normal. She told herself the flutter in her chest meant nothing. But as Isabella linked arms with her and led her into the garden, Catherine realized with sinking certainty that she'd just agreed to spend 3 days in close proximity to the one man she needed to stay far away from. And forced proximity had a way of burning down every wall you'd built. The garden was Isabella's idea. For 2 days, Catherine had become an unexpected companion to Alessandro's sister. Sharing meals, listening to stories about growing up in a world where money couldn't buy safety, walking through the estate's grounds while Isabella smoked cigarettes she wasn't supposed to have. And Alessandro watched from windows. Catherine felt his eyes constantly. In the garden. At breakfast. When she laughed at something Isabella said. He never approached, never interrupted, but his presence was a constant weight she couldn't shake. On the third afternoon, Isabella sprawled across a stone bench near the fountain, tilting her face toward the sun. "You want to know why I hate visiting?" she said suddenly. Catherine sat on the grass, pulling at the lawn. "You don't have to tell me. Our father was a monster." Isabella's voice went flat. Not the kind Alessandro is, controlled, strategic. No, Papa was chaos. Violent. Paranoid. He saw enemies everywhere, including in his own family. Catherine's hands stilled. "When I was 16, I fell in love with a boy. Just a boy. Normal. Sweet. Worked at his father's bakery." Isabella's smile was bitter. "Papa found out. Decided the boy's family was trying to infiltrate us, use me as leverage. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter to him." "What happened?" "The boy disappeared. His family left the city overnight. I never saw him again." Isabella's eyes were dry, but her voice cracked. "And Alessandro, my big brother who I worshipped, he helped. He was 22, already being groomed to take over. He chose Papa. Chose loyalty to the family over protecting me." Catherine's chest tightened. 3 years later, Papa died. Heart attack. And you know what Alessandro's first act as boss was? Isabella sat up, looking directly at her. "He found that boy. Marco. Found him in Milan, married with a daughter, happy. Alessandro gave him money anonymously. Made sure his bakery thrived. Never told me until last year." "Why did he tell you?" "Because I accused him of becoming Papa. Of being heartless. And he..." Isabella's voice softened. "He broke. Told me everything. How he hated himself for what he'd done. How he'd spent years trying to undo Papa's cruelty without dismantling the empire that keeps us safe. How he'd locked away every soft thing in himself because soft meant weak, and weak meant dead." Catherine's throat burned. "He's terrified of feeling anything," Isabella continued. "That's why he works constantly. Why he keeps everyone at a distance. Why he's never had a real relationship in his life. Because the last time he cared about someone, me, he failed catastrophically. And he decided the safest thing was to stop caring altogether." "Why are you telling me this?" Isabella's smile was knowing. "Because in 36 years, I've never seen my brother look at anyone the way he looks at you. And I think you should know what you're dealing with before you decide." "Decide what?" "Whether to run or stay." Before Catherine could respond, rapid footsteps approached. One of Alessandro's men, she recognized him as Carlo, the head of security, appeared, his face grim. "Miss Bellini, I need you inside. Now." Isabella's expression shifted instantly. "What's wrong?" "Your brother's orders. Someone's asking questions. About you. And about..." His eyes flicked to Catherine. "About Ms. Williams." Ice flooded Catherine's veins. "What? Why would anyone?" "Inside. Both of you." Carlo's hand moved to his concealed weapon. They were rushed through the garden, through the servants' entrance. Up back stairs Catherine had cleaned 100 times but never understood the strategic significance of until now. Alessandro met them in the hallway outside his office. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes, when they landed on Catherine, betrayed barely controlled panic. Get Isabella to the safe room, he ordered Carlo. I'm not leaving, Isabella snapped. What's happening? Someone leaked that you were here. And he looked at Catherine, something like anguish crossing his features. They have your information. Your mother's address in Detroit. Your sister's school. The world tilted. How? Catherine's voice came out broken. I'm nobody. Why would? Because you were seen with me. Alessandro's hands curled into fists. Because someone's watching this house, and they noticed. And now they think you matter to me. I don't. I'm just. You do. The words ripped out of him. You matter. And that makes you a target. And I. His voice cracked. I did this. I made you visible to the wrong people. The weight of his world crashed over her. This was what caring looked like in his universe. Not romance. Not rescue. Target acquisition. Danger. Collateral damage. My family, Catherine whispered. Are they safe? Alessandro was already moving. Phone to his ear. I have people in Detroit. They're being moved to a secure location as we speak. Your mother, your sister. They'll be protected. I promise you. Protected from what? From who? He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw real fear. From everyone who wants to hurt me by hurting what I care about. Isabella grabbed Catherine's hand. He'll keep them safe. When Alessandro makes a promise, he keeps it. Even if it costs him everything. Carlo's radio crackled. Sir, we have movement on the south perimeter. 3 vehicles. Unknown. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Get them to the basement. Now. Alessandro, Catherine started. He stepped close, his hand hovering near her face but not touching, like he didn't trust himself. I will fix this. I will keep you safe. All of you. But right now I need you to trust me. I don't even know you. Yes, you do. His eyes held hers with devastating intensity. You've known me for 3 years. You've cleaned my blood, my mess, my mistakes. You know exactly what I am. The question is whether you can trust me anyway. Footsteps thundered below. Voices shouted. We're out of time, Carlo urged. Isabella pulled Catherine toward the basement stairs. But Catherine looked back, watched Alessandro transform from the vulnerable man who'd said her name like a prayer into the wolf everyone feared. Shoulders squared, gun drawn, face emptied of everything except lethal focus. This was his world. Violence and strategy. Protection through destruction. And she'd been dragged into it because he'd looked up from his ledgers long enough to notice her in a red dress. As the basement door closed behind them, sealing them in reinforced silence, Catherine realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of his world. She was afraid of how badly she wanted him to come back from it alive. In the darkness, Isabella squeezed her hand. He'll be okay, she whispered. He always is. But Catherine heard what Isabella didn't say. Until one day he isn't. And the thought of a world where Alessandro Bellini stopped existing, where those green eyes went dark forever, made her chest crack open in ways she didn't understand. When you realize someone dangerous has become important to you, is it already too late to protect your heart? Let us know what you think below. The threat was neutralized by dawn. Catherine learned this from Isabella, who'd received a terse text from her brother. Clear. Stay put. But Alessandro didn't come down to the basement. Not for 6 hours. When he finally appeared in the doorway, exhausted and still wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes found Catherine immediately. He scanned her like he was checking for injuries, for cracks, for proof she was still whole. Your family is safe, he said, his voice rough from shouting orders all night. I moved them to a secure apartment in Detroit. Full security detail. Your mother's medication has been transferred. Your sister's enrolled in a private school nearby. They think it's a witness protection situation. Catherine's legs nearly gave out. They're okay. I spoke to your mother an hour ago. She's frightened but safe. I told her you were helping me with a security situation and that you'd call soon. He paused. I didn't tell her what you really are to me. And what am I? The question hung in the air. Isabella quietly excused herself, leaving them alone in the basement's cold fluorescent light. Alessandro moved closer, and this time he didn't stop himself from touching her. His hand cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd done in the past 12 hours. You're the reason I stayed alive tonight, he whispered. Every bullet I dodged, every decision I made, it was because I needed to come back. To you. Catherine's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath expensive fabric and violence. This is insane. I know. You've known me 4 days. I've known you 3 years. I was just too blind to see it. Alessandro. I've never brought a woman to this basement. Never let anyone see the safe room. Never told anyone about Isabella's past. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But you, I want you to know everything. Every dark corner. Every mistake. Every reason you should run. Why? Because if you're going to stay, I need you to do it with your eyes open. They spent the next hours in that basement like it was a confessional. He told her about his father's cruelty. About the first man he'd killed at 19. About the empire built on fear and the loneliness that came with power. About how he'd watched his mother wither from loving a monster and swore he'd never inflict that on anyone. And Catherine told him about Detroit. About her father leaving when she was 6. About choosing this job because it paid enough to keep her family afloat. About feeling invisible her entire life. Not just in his house, but everywhere. When you said my name that night, she whispered, it was the first time I felt like I existed in years. Alessandro pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You exist. God, Catherine, you exist so much it's destroying me. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her. Soft at first, then desperate, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth, the taste of possibility, the feeling of wanting something he couldn't control. When they finally broke apart, Catherine was shaking. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be with someone like you. Then we figure it out together. His hands framed her face. I don't need you to understand my world. I need you to be the reason I want to leave it. For the first time since the red dress, Catherine let herself hope. Maybe they could build something. Maybe his darkness and her light could find balance. Maybe. Isabella appeared at the top of the stairs. Alessandro. We have a problem. The softness in his expression vanished instantly. What kind of problem? The kind where the family wants to meet the woman who's making you weak. Catherine's blood went cold. Because in Alessandro's world, meet rarely meant conversation. It meant evaluation, judgment, elimination. And she'd just become the wolf's greatest vulnerability. The meeting was held in the estate's formal dining room, a space Catherine had cleaned but never entered as a guest. Now she sat at the table, facing 5 men in expensive suits who looked at her like she was a problem requiring solution. Alessandro sat at the head, his hand possessively on the back of her chair, but even he couldn't hide the tension radiating through the room. Gentlemen, he said coolly, this is Catherine Williams. And before anyone speaks out of turn, understand that she's under my protection. Your protection, said an older man with silver hair, Antonio, his father's former consigliere. Or your distraction? Careful, Antonio. We're all thinking it. Antonio leaned forward. For weeks you've been unfocused. Missing meetings. Making emotional decisions. And now we discover it's because of... His eyes raked over Catherine with undisguised contempt. The help. Catherine's fingernails dug into her palms. She's not. Alessandro started. What is she then? Another man interrupted. Your girlfriend? Your lover? In our world, Alessandro, relationships are weapons. And you've just handed our enemies a loaded gun. I can protect her. Like you protected Isabella? Antonio's voice was ice. The threat last night happened because someone saw you looking at this woman like she mattered. Your weakness is already bleeding into operations. Men are questioning your judgment. Then they can question it to my face. We are. Antonio stood. You're compromised. You've forgotten that men like us don't get love stories. We get leverage and loss. Your father understood this. Your grandfather understood this. But you see a pretty face and forget everything. Alessandro's hand tightened on Catherine's chair. Enough. Is it serious? Another voice asked, younger, hungry. Or is she just a distraction you'll tire of in a month? The question hung like poison. Catherine felt Alessandro tense beside her, felt the room waiting for his answer. And in that moment, she understood the impossible position he was in. If he claimed she was nothing, he'd make her a target, disposable, unworthy of protection. If he claimed she was everything, he'd make her an even bigger target, valuable, worth taking. There was no good answer. She's... Alessandro began. Nothing, Catherine said quietly. I'm nothing to him. Every head turned toward her. I work here. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mr. Bellini was kind enough to ensure my family's safety after the incident, but there's no relationship. No distraction. Her voice didn't shake even though her hands did under the table. I'll resign, effective immediately. You'll never see me again. She stood, not looking at Alessandro, feeling his shocked gaze burning into her. Catherine. His voice was raw. Thank you for your hospitality, sir. The formality was a knife between them. I'll collect my things. She walked out of that dining room with her head high and her heart shattering, feeling his eyes follow her every step. Behind her she heard Antonio's satisfied voice. Smart woman. She understands what you refuse to. Our world has no room for softness. Catherine made it to her room before the tears came. She packed her few belongings with shaking hands, including the red dress she'd never wear again. She'd done the right thing. She'd saved them both from an impossible situation. Her door crashed open. Alessandro filled the doorway, his chest heaving, his face a mess of fury and anguish. How dare you, he breathed. I did what needed to be done. You humiliated me. Dismissed what we. There is no we. Catherine's voice cracked. There was never a we. You said it yourself. You're a wolf, and wolves devour everything soft. I refuse to be something you consume and then regret. You think I'd regret you? I think you'd get me killed. The words ripped out of her. I think your world would chew me up and spit me out, and I think you'd blame yourself forever, and I think... Her voice broke. I think I'm not strong enough to watch you choose between me and everything you've built. So I'm choosing for you. That's not your choice to make. Yes, it is. Because I'm the one who'll lose everything. You'll lose a distraction. I'll lose my life. The silence between them was devastating. Alessandro's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. So that's it? You walk away? After everything? After 4 days, Catherine corrected, tears streaming down her face. We had 4 days, Alessandro. That's not everything. That's barely anything. It was everything to me. The words broke her. But she grabbed her bag anyway and pushed past him, down the stairs, through the kitchen where Mrs. Chen watched with knowing sadness, out the servants' entrance she'd used for 3 years. Behind her, the estate loomed, beautiful and terrible and full of a man she'd never have. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Alessandro standing at his office window, watching her leave, his hand pressed against the glass like he could reach through it and pull her back. She would have seen the wolf break. 3 weeks passed like open wounds. Catherine moved back to her mother's new apartment in Detroit, the one Alessandro had arranged, with security she never saw but knew was there. She found work at a hotel, scrubbing different floors, invisible again. Her mother asked questions she couldn't answer. Her sister noticed how she sometimes stopped mid-sentence, staring at nothing. And every night, Catherine dreamed of green eyes and impossible choices. She told herself it would fade. That 4 days couldn't leave permanent damage. That she'd done the right thing. But her heart didn't believe her. In the estate, Alessandro stopped pretending to function. He attended meetings like a ghost. Made decisions with mechanical precision. Removed Antonio from his position with such cold efficiency that the remaining men never questioned him again. He worked 20-hour days because sleep meant dreaming of her. Isabella visited weekly, watching him disintegrate. Call her, she begged. She made her choice. She made the choice she thought would keep both of you alive. That's different. Is it? Alessandro. Isabella grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Papa died alone. Hard. Bitter. Is that what you want? To prove you're strong by destroying the one real thing you've ever had. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know how to be what she needs. I don't know how to keep her safe and keep her mine. I don't. So figure it out. Because right now, you're choosing fear. And the brother I know doesn't bow to anything, especially not fear. That night, Alessandro sat in his office, holding the security report on Catherine. It detailed everything. Her work schedule, her family's adjustment, the fact that she walked to work every day listening to music that was probably too loud. She was safe, protected, alive, and completely out of his reach. He could leave it that way. Could let her build a normal life far from his darkness. Could prove he loved her by staying away. Or he could be selfish. Could choose her over safety. Could offer her a life that would always include danger but would also include him. All of him, without walls or lies or pretense. The choice terrified him more than any enemy ever had. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She cries in the shower. Thought you should know. Isabella, using burner phone. Something in his chest cracked completely. Alessandro stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the office for the first time in weeks with actual purpose. Where are you going? His driver asked. Detroit. Sir, you have the commission meeting in. Cancel it. Cancel everything. He climbed into the car, his heart pounding for the first time since she'd left. I'm going to do something catastrophically stupid. Which is? Choose her. Over everything. Over everyone. Over the empire my father built and the life I've known. I'm choosing her. The driver smiled. About damn time, boss. Catherine was walking home from her shift when the black car pulled alongside her. Her heart stopped. The window rolled down, and there he was, Alessandro Bellini, looking exhausted and terrified and absolutely determined. Get in the car, he said. No. Catherine, please. You can't just show up. I know. I know I have no right. I know 3 weeks ago you made the smart choice and I should respect it. But I can't. He opened the door, stepped out onto the sidewalk. I can't respect it because I've spent 21 days trying to convince myself I could live without you, and I can't. I won't. People walked past, staring. Catherine's hands shook. Your world. I'll change it. I'll burn the whole thing down if that's what it takes. Alessandro. I love you. The word stopped everything. I love you, and I'm terrified, and I have no idea how to do this, but I'm choosing you anyway. Over safety. Over logic. Over everything I've ever known. I'm choosing you, Catherine. The only question is whether you'll choose me back. Tears streamed down her face. This was insane. Impossible. Everything she'd walked away from. If I say yes, she whispered. If I choose you, what happens? I don't know. But we'll figure it out. Together. He held out his hand. And Catherine, who'd spent her whole life being invisible, being careful, being small, made the most reckless choice of her life. She took it. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the estate's garden wearing another dress. White this time, simple and perfect. It wasn't a wedding. Alessandro had proposed that, but Catherine had laughed and said, "Let's survive a year first before we make it legal." Instead, it was something smaller. A promise ceremony. Just Isabella, Catherine's family, and a handful of Alessandro's men who'd learned to respect the woman who'd tamed their boss. Alessandro held both her hands, his thumb tracing the ring he'd given her, a simple band engraved with the date he'd first seen her in red. "I don't have pretty words," he said quietly. "I'm not good at this." "Then just tell me the truth." "The truth is you terrify me. Every day I wake up afraid something will take you from me. Afraid I'll fail you the way I've failed everyone I've loved. Afraid that my darkness will swallow your light." Catherine squeezed his hands. And I choose you anyway. Every day. Every moment. I choose you over fear. She smiled, tears in her eyes. I choose you too. Even though you're bossy and dramatic and you still sometimes forget I'm not your employee. He laughed. A real laugh that made Isabella tear up from where she stood watching. I choose you, Catherine continued, even though your world is dangerous and complicated. I choose you because underneath the wolf, there's a man who kept his sister's secrets, who protected my family, who learned my name. I choose the man who looks at me like I hung the stars. You did, he whispered. You hung every star in my sky. He kissed her softly, and the small gathering erupted in applause. Later, at sunset, Catherine found Alessandro alone on the terrace where they'd first talked in the basement, where she'd first seen past the monster to the man. Regrets? She asked, sliding into his arms. Only that I wasted 3 years being blind. We wouldn't have been ready 3 years ago. No. No. You needed to learn you could want something you couldn't control. And I needed to learn I deserved to be seen. She looked up at him. We needed to become people who could meet in the middle. Alessandro kissed her forehead. The family's adjusting. Antonio still hates me. Antonio's retiring early. Permanently. Catherine laughed. You can't just, actually yes you can. You're you. I'm working on being less me and more us. I like us. So do I. They stood there as the sun painted the sky red, the same shade as the dress that had changed everything. In the distance, Isabella played with Catherine's sister, their laughter carrying on the wind. Security patrolled, but less visibly now. The estate felt less like a fortress and more like a home. It wasn't perfect. Alessandro still had nightmares. Catherine still sometimes felt out of place in his world. They fought about his overprotectiveness and her stubborn independence. But they chose each other. Every day. Through the fear and the mess and the impossible odds. Thank you, Alessandro said suddenly. For what? For wearing that dress. For refusing to stay invisible. For being brave enough to choose me when every logical bone in your body said run. Catherine turned in his arms, cupped his face the way he always cupped hers. Thank you for finally looking up. He smiled, the real smile he saved only for her. Best decision I ever made. She kissed him as the sun set on their old lives and rose on something new. Something neither had planned but both had chosen. Something that looked a lot like love. Sometimes the most powerful love stories start with a single moment of being truly seen. When did someone finally notice you in a way that changed everything? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.